everyone. Welcome to another K6 Office Hours. I am Nicole van der Hoeven.
And I'm Simme, and today we are joined by our newest recruit, Floor. Whee!
Yay! That's me.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome to have you on. Would you like to say a little something about yourself? Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
I think that makes sense. So yeah, my name is Floor. I joined K6 last week as the technical program manager. I come from 2.5 years at Microsoft, which is a different size company than K6, and I'm very glad to have joined a smaller team for once again. Before Microsoft, I worked in different developer relations type of roles, in online marketing roles, especially for developer tools companies. I have lived and worked in Austria and Germany for 8 years. So I speak German. And there I had a co-working space and a startup accelerator program that I ran. And a lot of the startups that went through that program are still, like kicking it today. So that's very exciting to see. Yeah, what else? I live in the Netherlands, just like Nicole. So that's nice.
Yay.
So, when we start, being allowed to meet up again, we can work together every now and then from a place to the Netherlands. That'd be nice. I think we have another team member in the Netherlands, right? So that should be.
Yes, Ivan. Yeah. And actually, we temporarily have a fourth one in Belgium. He's probably the closest to me right now, physically.
Could be.
Even though it's in another country, because I live south. But yes, we will meet up soon, hopefully.
Can't wait. I mean,
what about your chickens?
Sorry?
What about your chickens?
Oh, yeah. We joked about it before going live. So, I guess I did add a little bit to the family since the pandemic. But yeah, I have 3 chicks. They're still chicks though because they're quite small.
Okay.
Only in about 6 weeks will they start laying eggs. So I'm really much looking forward to that point in time. And also in the last week, I've added another bunny to the family. So there is a fully fledged farm outside. And I also have a dog, a dachshund sausage dog that I love very much, but she's already 4, so I've had her for a little bit longer time. Yeah.
So what made you want to join K6 other than Simme and me?
Well, so Simme and I think we've met during a conference, right, in Berlin. Which was for sort of maintainers of open source projects to come together and talk about, the common issues that they face and, like how to solve for different problems. And we got talking there, and then we sort of continued talking. And Simme mentioned at one point that there were actually several openings at K6. And I looked at them, and then 3 out of the 4 that he mentioned, I was just like, oh, well, like, I do a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this. I would like to, to see if we can sort of combine different things from the different jobs and see if that's something that you could see me in. And I think here we are. Yeah, I really wanted to work again for like a smaller company and a company where remote is truly remote and not basically US remote, where you need to really adjust to US, your colleagues in the US, maybe potentially move there if you want to make a bigger splash at one point. And moving to the US is not necessarily something that is on my bucket list.
It's actually kind of fun because at one point, Floor tried to bring me onto Microsoft.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to disclose that, so I didn't.
And then I ultimately decided to join K6 instead, and how the tables have turned.
Right.
I guess, Simme, you were more convincing?
No, I don't think that was the issue. I think K6 was more convincing in general.
he's selling.
Yeah, and you know, Floor, you were talking about the different roles. I think that's definitely one of the selling points of K6 because I mean, my role is as a developer advocate, really, but I'm not a developer. I'm a tester. So I was also in the same situation where I'm like, well, some parts of this I've done, other parts I haven't, and then in this other job, some parts of that I've done. But I think in K6 we focus on hiring people who we could work with, like that we're excited to work with, and then we figure out the roles later.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to pick my own job title, so I was already really happy with that. Yeah.
And then one other thing that we do at K6 is that the first week, or I mean, it's not really like very strict for the time frame, but we do have what we call a week of testing where everybody new, regardless of their experience, is supposed to go and test some aspect of K6. What did you end up doing for your week of testing?
Yeah, so and I heard that a lot of people try out the product, which is great. Like, and I think it's a great idea, the week of testing, because it gives you a chance to really get familiar with the product and with the team and with the whole sort of like ecosystem around it. It allows you to ask a lot of questions because you'll need to ask a lot of questions. And also for the team, it shows what you're looking for, right? And what you're looking at and what are your interest points. So I specifically looked at accessibility of the marketing website and the docs, and it's still a little bit of an ongoing project as well. But I did find a couple of things already that could be improved on the website. So that included a couple of things like color contrast wasn't right, wasn't good enough. And some parts of the website didn't, or like images and so on, didn't have alt text that could be added. And let me see also if I have a couple of things written down in that regard. Yeah, the previous issue that, yeah.
I was just going to say, I really love that you chose to focus on this because at least since I've joined, which hasn't been that long ago, admittedly, but I don't think anybody's focused on that. So I think it's worth noting that accessibility testing is a very important form of testing. It's not maybe as flashy as performance testing or even functional testing, but it can absolutely change the entire experience of an end user. And it's something that doesn't get enough love.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think it's super important. And throughout my career, and definitely the last couple of years, I've focused very much on testing for diversity and inclusion. So also inclusive using inclusive language and accessibility. And for inclusive language, that is not only to make sure that language isn't too gendered or maybe offensive to different groups, but also make sure that you don't mention that something is easy or like simple, because for the person reading it, they might be reading about this for the first time. For them, it's not simple or easy. And they might be, they might get scared off by reading that something should be easy, because they might think, okay, so it's not easy for me, so maybe this is not for me, and move away. And I think that's not what you want. You want to try and pull as many people in as you possibly do, and hopefully, prepare them and give them all of the tools to be, productive with your tools. And so if they feel like they can't be because like that they feel like that it's too hard for them, then that's too bad. And you're missing out on a lot of potential customers. So it's also just bad for business. And so and a couple of more things that we found, but it's not necessarily for the homepage per se, or for the docs per se, is, for instance, for these office hours. There's captioning. Let's download the captions and make a good transcript out of it, because the captions alone are not enough, because you don't know who's talking, and that's and I feel like focusing on making things more accessible makes it better for everyone, not only people that maybe can't hear, but also for very situational things. Like I might be listening into podcast. I would, like I see some people listening to podcasts or when they're on their commute, but sometimes, like a Wi-Fi might be sort of like spotty, or the sound of the transportation might be too loud, and you might not hear it very well. And so if you have good captions or a good transcript that you can read afterwards, then that can be beneficial to all kinds of users in all kinds of situations.
I think we had Marie Drake a few episodes early on in the office hours, actually, and she was talking about doing accessibility testing with Cyprus. And one thing that she said stuck out to me, because she said that accessibility isn't just for disabled people, because, for example, you can have a ramp, like a physical ramp instead of stairs. And you might think that's only for people who need wheelchairs. But a lot of people who don't need wheelchairs also prefer ramps, because it's just an easier way to get up to the next level. And that's kind of what you're saying, right? With captions not being just for people who are hard of hearing. For me, I like to consume a lot of content and videos in different languages, but I would consume way less if they didn't have captions in English or in some other language that I understand. And there's nothing wrong with my hearing, but it still helps me. It's just another way to access content that would not have been accessible to me otherwise.
Yeah, and I think also in tech we use a lot of jargon and abbreviations and so on, and so if someone and everybody pronounces Kubernetes differently, right? But so how am I to understand as a newcomer what kind of technology they might be talking about if I think I got it wrong, or like I understood it wrong? What is it? The kubectl. I think everybody pronounces this differently.
Yes.
I don't know. Like there's all these different, ways that people pronounce it, and but they're talking about the same thing, and it's really hard for people that aren't that familiar yet to then catch those differences, and they might they might feel lost. And again, that's all. It's too bad.
So has there been a decision on that, by the way? Is it cube cuddle? Is it cube control? Cube cattle?
No, so my former colleague at Microsoft always said cube cuddle, which is a very Dutch way to somehow pronounce it. I actually created her sticker so that she can use that. So no, I don't think there's been a decision there. There's no standard.
Also, I think within the K16, you can count on one hand, I believe, the number of native English speakers. So we are a very linguistically diverse company from that perspective.
Yeah, I think out of the 25, or I think we're approaching 30. I think we are 30. We have 4 or 5 native English speakers, something like that. So definitely not the majority.
And it's cool and it's fun, and I also love that everybody is from such a different from different countries, from different cultures. I think that you learn so much when you're in a team, and especially when the team is rather small, right? Because then you need to know the differences, and you need to understand the different cultures in order to work and collaborate. And I think that's super interesting. So in my previous role at Microsoft, I took care of developer communities in Western Europe, and in Western Europe alone, people are so different, and the cultures are so different. And some countries really want to have documentation and workshop material in their native language, and then there's a lot of countries where that is not really a high priority request. It's maybe a nice to have, but it's definitely not what people are looking for. And I find that incredibly interesting, how you can just you can cross the border and people might have very different needs and requests.
I just want to plug our K6 documentation en español.
Very smooth.
Very
smooth.
Let me. Oh, of course, and I put it in the private chat. That just makes sense. But yeah, we have partnered with a native Spanish speaker. We actually have a few native Spanish speakers here, but he's gone and they've gone and translated a lot of our documentation. So if it's easier we have any Spanish speakers in the audience, it's a pretty good. They've done pretty good work, and we've also gotten some blog posts translated into both Spanish and Chinese. So we're definitely making an effort to try and cater for a more global audience. There's still more to do, though, which I think your accessibility review showed.
Yeah, it was, like small iterations. It's you can only, it doesn't need to happen tomorrow. I mean, would be cool, but that's kind of impossible. But yeah, I'm just happy that that there's an audience for this and people find it important.
So, what did you use to do your automated accessibility review?
Let me post the link. Let me find the link. Actually, that's a good question.
Simme has this superpower where you just have to mention something, and a few seconds later, it's there.
Cool. But I posted it in a private chat here, and you should post it in. Well, that is so LXJS. That is something else. Like the LXJS is for spotting. No, but I mean I can talk about it because I love this project, and it's for spotting in like language that is inconsiderate, basically, and it also gives alternatives to whatever word you're using that might be offensive to people, or that might put up a barrier for people. So that catches things like the easy and simple, like I said before, but also maybe words that you're using that like are maybe even swear words or just words that might just be inconsiderate. And it's a JavaScript library, and you can add it to your project or just run it locally and spot all of those things and sort of one-click change it as well. This is the website that I use to do these automated accessibility reviews. Of course, there's like a consultancy thing behind it, so if you want to dive deeper with an expert, then you can also do that. But it helps you at least spot things like color contrast and font size issues, or if your website is if you're not able to operate the website with just a keyboard, which is an issue that one of the engineers actually brought forward also already at K6, and there is a PR that takes care of a lot of that already. So like there's been some work already, so that's very good.
Makes me think of the Vimium extension for Chrome, which sort of solves that for you because you get Vim shortcuts for everything. So I'm gonna paste that.
Does it really solve it though? I mean, is that solving things to have Vim shortcuts?
Well, I'm just pressing F, and then everything is labeled with a letter, and then the letter I press on is what gets pressed on the screen. So I've been using that for years.
It solves something for Simme, so it's useful.
So one of the things that I see we didn't do too well on, actually 5 out of 14 failed, is perceivable. It's a perceivable category. What does that mean? Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing we scored lowest on was the robustness. So that's basically the
robustness. Okay.
Yeah, so that's basically the being able to operate it with a keyboard. Sorry, that's the operable one. And perceivable. Yeah, exactly. So that the content doesn't rely only on one sense, like vision or hearing, to be found or understood. And that's, for instance, like using the right HTML tags for items on your page, for using alt text on your page, for using the right color contrast and also using the like a correct sequence of things. So if you're if your HTML documents is like one kind of is a mess, and you know, like the things are not necessarily in order, but you fix that somehow in your CSS, then that's, for instance, an example of perceivability that, you know, it doesn't work so well.
I think another thing that Simme has called me out on, and I'm glad that he does, is not putting alt text on images. And that's also a great example for it not just being useful for the vision impaired, but also what if you're on a crappy mobile connection and it doesn't load? Yeah, that's still useful to at least know what the picture was of.
Yeah, 100%. And I saw a couple of instances, but it was, I must say, it's mostly like really old blog posts that don't have that, but rely very heavily on those images to tell a story. And so if it, and I think all of those images, so it was really like 2 sentences image, 2 sentences image, and those images all had the same alt text. And so that doesn't tell a user anything. And I also want to call out, like, there's one thing that you can do to make your tweets more accessible as well, is that you can add alt text to your images there, or your GIFs there. And I think that really helps, because I think a lot of people rely on GIFs to sort of convey an emotion, or make sure try to convey that whatever they wrote before is sort of ironic or like tongue in cheek. But if you don't know, you don't know, because you can't see it. And I have been, ever since I found out, I was at a conference where someone told me this, and I was like, wow, that is amazing. I had no idea that this functionality even existed, and it's so good.
Actually, my mother, who has no trouble with her vision, she constantly sends me screenshots of these GIFs, and she says, "What does this mean?" And it's not that she doesn't see it; it's that she doesn't understand the pop culture references or whatever. So it's also useful from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, she also asks me that for emojis.
Well, I mean, truth be told, they are difficult to decipher sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm not being facetious. It is difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
When I was young, we used to use colon dash and parentheses to do smileys and emojis.
Wait, I still do.
Yeah. I still do, because we're all from your generations in that.
But have you ever been told that, oh, you're using the old emoji? Yeah. Old person emojis.
They told me, I think I know when you were born because you're using this, or like what generation you're from because you're still using this.
Oh, well, it's okay. Accessibility for the old is a thing. But you know how usually when people talk about software testing, they separate testing in general into functional and non-functional. There's one guy that I've spoken with recently, Paul Bruce. He's a performance tester, and he has this rant, and he says that it shouldn't be called non-functional testing, and he has a really good point, because things like performance or accessibility or localization or security, they are essential to the functionality of a software. It might not be features related, but they drastically affect how a user is going to feel about your application, or whether or not they can even use it. So he insists on the term operational requirements or operational testing, because they're not features-based, but they are aspects that you need to test in order to determine whether your application operates well.
Yeah, it's usable. So is already looking up this link? Because that sounds like a...
Yes, I don't know if you can find that, but I will look it up, because he has a YouTube video on it. But yeah, his name is Paul Bruce. What else was there anything we did well in your accessibility review?
I mean, it was not all bad. So
good to know.
And I still need to do also because now I've done the marketing website, right, and documentation. I've looked at the blog, and what I want to look at next is also the output of a load test, if that's something in the platform itself, or in the dashboard itself, if that's something that can be improved upon. So stay tuned for that. But I mean, we definitely did well in a couple of aspects. Most color contrasts are actually really good. There's been alt text added for sure. Like there's a lot of good stuff. And you're right. Maybe we focus too much on the bad stuff because that's the stuff that needs to be fixing. And I should have given kudos where kudos are due.
Yeah, and we have a great team, but we're still a pretty small team. I think we only have one like graphical design person. That's Maya, and she has been a great advocate. I've been an advocate for just accessibility or other ways to express ideas. Simplifying language to make it more understandable. I've been on a few projects with her where she's like, yes, but how would people know that if they're not in the know in testing? If they're new to testing, how would they know that? And I think we need people like that. We need more people like that who think about those things.
Yeah, and it's even not only the people that are new to testing, but maybe the people that make the decision to buy a tool, yes or no. Like that's sort of the business decision makers, or however you want to call them, and they're not necessarily versed in the technology that they're about to swipe their credit card for, but it is the people that you want to have in your boat. And so yeah.
I just want to say, I personally, if some of our developers are watching, I'm still holding out for K6 dark mode. That's an accessibility thing.
It can be.
Yeah, it can be searingly bright if it's white. I don't know. That happens to me.
Especially if you're context switching, if you're in your editor before, and that's all in your dark theme, and then you need to switch to something, then definitely. Yeah, I've been using GitHub in dark mode, and I really like it. Like I wouldn't want it.
Although once the dimmed mode became generally available, I immediately switched to that and have never looked back.
That's what you're on? Okay.
It's so nice. It's still dark, but it's not black. Because I want some vibrance in the page still. And usually the classic dark mode just strips away all of that and just makes it white on black. So
I mean, it's still muted colors, but near black.
I think with a lot of accessibility things, options, I think it's the choice that's important. Like it's not about making all of the K6 site always on dark mode for everybody. It's giving people the choice to set that or gray mode or whatever it is that you like. Dim mode, you said.
Yeah,
you can create it.
It can be really So Simme is adding it to the backlog right now.
Yeah.
And again, like it can be really, depending on the context, because if you sit outside, you might want to, have a different type of screen, especially when you're in the Netherlands, or I guess also in Sweden, where the sun isn't out for so many days in a year, and so maybe you really want to enjoy it and work from your garden. I mean, it is a luxury problem, I guess, but still, like that could be the case.
Yeah. Was there anything else from your accessibility review that you wanted to highlight? What can we do better? And what can other people who are developing or testing their own applications look for?
Yeah, well, definitely try and use that automated review just to catch the biggest things. I think that helps a lot. Thank you for pulling it up again. I think that already helps a lot. And then if you have, and I love that they link to all the different things that you can just improve and learn more about. But if you have trouble figuring out exactly what you can do, then you can always reach out to like an expert I'm also definitely not an expert on accessibility testing. I just think it's very important, and I've learned a lot during like the last, I don't know, 2 years or something about accessibility testing. But definitely not an expert. You should hire someone to have a look at your website. But there are some sort of quick fixes or small fixes where you can make it a whole lot better by doing a bit.
Yes. I just also put a link to our office hours with Marie, where she has a different approach. She uses Cypress to script like automated accessibility tests, which is also another route. So once it's in code, you can tie that into CI/CD pipelines as well.
What I've also done once, and it's been, I don't know, I guess I sometimes want to limit myself and see what happens. So there's this Node.js library. It's where you can make sure that all JavaScript is disabled on your page, and then see what still loads. And that's also an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, you would be surprised by how little you can load if you've never tried that before.
Yes. Yeah. That is super interesting to see how much we rely on JavaScript and JavaScript libraries for our stuff to work, and that's it's an experience.
Definitely, yeah. As well as using, if you've ever tried it, to use links in the terminal to try to navigate a web page just by cursors in the terminal. So it strips away all graphics, all JavaScript, all of that. And most pages are unfortunately completely useless in that mode.
Yeah.
You also pointed out here that the BERT, if for people who don't know, BERT is our mascot for K6. There are different versions of BERT. There's even a Berta. You can do it Rosie styled, like Bertha, I guess. But it's all because in the original office of K6, which was then Gator Hole, I think, they had crocodiles in the office in tanks. But yeah, Floor, you pointed out that they don't even have alt texts. That's a big miss, I think.
Yeah, because again, you're also, you try and convey some sort of emotion or some familiarity through the mascot, and if you can't see the mascot, you don't feel that, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, even for this, sorry.
Yeah, but it's a small fix, right? And so,
yeah, we will do
in the case, yeah, in the case of Markdown, which we use for all our docs, that is actually a lot better in terms of encouraging accessibility. Cautiousness or what? How do you want to? Yeah, because then you actually use the tags you use or the markup you use to do images in Markdown actually enforces you to first type the alt text and then give the URL to the image, which is quite nice. And I would say that's probably why I think almost all images in the docs have alt text, while the product page doesn't, because that's HTML or JS rather. So it's much easier to just forget about that in that case. Yeah.
Yeah. And from our point of view, Floor has already talked to me. I am going to be downloading the captions from YouTube and I already do the timestamps and chapters on every YouTube video, but I'm going to give that to Floor, and she's going to publish it as a transcript on the blog. Yes. So hold us accountable.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, yeah. I think that because, right, and more people can read it or can consume what's been discussed in the office hours. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Unfortunately, version 1 won't have filter buttons where you can just toggle off everything I say, but we'll consider that for later releases.
No. Okay, so why don't you tell us about one of the programs that you are going to be working on in your new role at K6?
Yeah, so it's one of the first things that I picked up and bothered Simme with, because I come very much from open source background, and I run with a couple of former colleagues. I run a weekly meetup as well on open source technology topics, and we've started with this actually like last year, beginning of the year, when there's the FOSDEM conference, if you know, like this is this massive open source conference in Belgium. And we did a sort of a road to FOSDEM where every day we would go to a different city, and on our way basically from Amsterdam to Brussels, and bring an open source meetup on open source topics. And we had 2 speakers from Microsoft, because it still is Microsoft, that are in the open source organization to join those meetups as a speaker. And then we had speakers from the community. And we liked that very much and wanted to do the same thing this year. And then, or this year. But of course, like through the pandemic, I mean, what are years, right? What are months, what are days, what are years in this time? But this year, of course, we couldn't do that in person. And so we did a sort of a virtual tour to FOSDEM, where we would have the 6 weeks leading, or 5 weeks rather, leading up to FOSDEM, have a meetup about open source tech every week. And even before that, when there was Hacktoberfest, we did a whole series on how to contribute to open source. What even are licenses? What is a code of conduct? What is, like, how do you do a pull request? Like, what do you look at? What are some of the open source etiquette rules, I guess? And invited people to come and work on those. We did a lot of interviews with open source maintainers, because we wanted to make open source projects that were actively looking for contributors just more discoverable. Because if you think also during Hacktoberfest, like in your preparation for Hacktoberfest, where that's an annual thing, right? And you contribute to open source, and then I don't know, you do 4 or 5 pull requests and you get a T-shirt. But the T-shirt is like so unimportant. Like I just hope that many people are just doing it to get a little bit of more familiar in the contributing to open source. That's more of like something that they actively think of when they're at their day job and they're using a certain kind of technology that they can give back. And so we interviewed all these people to make sure that those are the people that are really looking for contributions during Hacktoberfest. So maybe consider working on their projects. Anyway, like that was supposed to be only around sort of FOSDEM and Hacktoberfest, but then we had so much fun and there were so many more questions that we had that we just decided to continue. So now we have a meetup every week, and I mean, I have to admit it's a lot, and we don't make it every week because sometimes it gets really hard. But we try and pick a different topic for every meetup. Sometimes it's about runtime. So we had meetups about Go and Python and Java and Ruby, which is sort of like where I come from, but also about other sort of higher level topics like, I don't know, chaos engineering. We talked about SRE. We talked about funding and sponsoring and licensing and like whatnot. Like we talked about a lot of different things. And so of course when I saw the K6 as an open source support program, I was like, yes, I want to look at that first. And I want to see what it does and what makes someone eligible to benefit from that. So the open source support program is for maintainers or core contributors to a project that really would benefit from using K6 Cloud, but maybe can't afford that right now because they're a maintainer of a project that maybe just blew up overnight in popularity. They hadn't seen this coming. They thought they were just sharing something with some peers on the internet, and they need to make sure that their stuff is robust.
Maybe we can show that as well. Oh, right on cue.
Yeah, it magically pops up. So what I worked on first is, and in discussion with Simme, was the eligibility requirements. because in the previous version, I think I felt like it was a little, it was not transparent enough, and I think it was very restrictive. And Simme mentioned, and I understand what he was saying is like, well, if they feel like, I assume that people will apply anyway, even if they don't meet all the requirements. But I think that not many people are that bold or that brazen. Actually, I think a lot of people will read something that is quite restrictive and think, oh, not for me. Well, too bad. Would have loved to do that, but too bad. So I think one of the requirements, for instance, was that you may not offer paid sponsorship or receive funding from commercial companies or organizations. And I read that as, well, what if I have, a GitHub sponsors page put up, and occasionally someone decides to give me $10 or something. Like that is a paid sponsorship, but so would that exclude me from using this? Because that, I can't even do my daily shoppings from these $10. Like, am I then really excluded from using this benefit? And so we framed it in a slightly different way, where it's should not exceed the point where you can afford the expense of K6 Cloud. And then, of course, that is still to be decided. So if we get an application, we can have a look at, for instance, Open Collective, if they have made their financials open and public, and we can still decide, well, is this something that oh my gosh, did you do that?
Yes.
There was a bee that just flew by my head.
That's hilarious.
Is this a first in the office hours?
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
I do want to stress though how awesome this is, because basically if you qualify under this program, you get a free plan to K6. And initially, I think it's for 1 year, but it's renewable if you still qualify under these requirements. So I hadn't really heard of, I don't know if there is a load testing platform or tool that offers this. So I think it's pretty cool that we are, and it just shows how committed the whole team is to open source and to giving back.
I love when a company or tool or product offers an open source plan that is on par with your enterprise plan or your higher level plan. So that was one.
What about the regular committer part? What is a regular committer?
Well, if you're, I mean, that's still, that is kind of vague because it's really hard to quantify, right? Because you can't say you commit X line of code like every week or something. That's really hard to qualify or quantify rather. But that's something that if someone applies, you can, hash that out when you're in a conversation. And I don't think that the regular committer is like regular. I think is sort of vague enough that many people could find themselves in that statement. Whereas paid sponsorship is like, okay, well that could be a lot of things.
And I think the primary reason for that is just to, make a distinction that if someone fixes one typo in a README once as a drive-by commit, then that person will obviously not be eligible under these conditions. And I think that's mainly what we're after. So if you're a regular committer in the sense that you contribute once every year, but you commit something meaningful every year, then that might still qualify you. So you shouldn't think of it as a hard limit, but rather that there has to be some kind of continuity in how you contribute to the project.
Yeah. One thing that I still am a little bit about is that you may not provide any paid support, consulting, or training services for your project. And one of the links that I've shared with you prior to this office hours is the discussion about funding and sponsoring that we had on Contributing Today. And that was with, among other people, Henry from the Babel project. And he mentioned, like, now that he is a full-time maintainer, the sort of the question of consistent sponsoring or like funding coming into the project is like his main concern. He doesn't actually, he doesn't jump much in the code anymore because there's just, as a maintainer, you have so many other tasks that you need to attend to, and one of those is making sure that there's a consistent amount of sponsoring coming in so that you can afford all of your expenses. And so because he felt, or he feels rather, so sort of insecure about this, that there's a consistent amount of money coming in, he does offer, or he's considering offering like paid trainings or workshops or whatever, just to make sure that there's this sort of like steady thing coming in. And maybe Babel is too big a project to apply for this project. I don't know. Like, I'm only here for a little while. I think Simme should pull the trigger on that one. But I think that that's. I think it's a valid concern for maintainers, and so I'm not sure. But maybe in a next iteration we'll tackle that one. There was another one where the project or the community needs to be active, and we were both like, oh yeah, but what does active actually mean? Like, if there's a lot of fights in the issues, it's definitely active, but I don't think that's the activity that we're looking for. So maybe we need to specify that a little bit. That it's in active development at least, and that it's and maybe we also want to specify, because we didn't before, that the project community has a code of conduct, so that we can sort of be sure, or at least have something to reference, that it's a safe space for people to contribute to, because I think that's the kind of project we want to support, and rather not the projects that are not so safe for people. And then the last one, yeah.
I think essentially we have these requirements not to restrict not to prevent genuine people from applying, but basically to prevent abuse. We don't want people to apply who maybe just have one repository that they created just to be able to get access to K6 for their regular job, or we don't want big corporations who can afford to pay for a license. We are doing this at a loss. There is nothing in the requirements that say that it has to in any way be related to K6 or load testing or testing in general. This is just, we're trying to give back. We're trying to do a good thing. And I think that if you fall within the spirit of the requirements, that maybe you should reach out to us. There's still an element of us being, real humans about whether or not we accept people into this.
Yeah, that
would you two agree?
Makes sense. And I'm also thinking that it's very important that we continuously try to update this text to make that visible as part of the text as well, because it might be hard, and that's an accessibility thing as well. I think it might be hard to understand the spirit of the text if you're not the one writing the text, because many people might interpret it very differently. And I think it was so good that Floor actually called out that we had this no paid sponsorship clause in the eligibility requirements. And it got me thinking, because from the point of privilege that I'm a male and somewhat white and somewhat young, it's kind of, to me, it's obvious that I would just try it anyway and see what results I get. But that might not be the case for everyone. So nuancing that a bit and making sure that it's not just approachable for young white males, it really makes a difference. And it also makes the giving back more fair, right? So I think we need to continuously go through this and make sure that the requirements are formulated in a way that they actually convey what we're trying to, the message we're trying to send.
Yeah.
So definitely these will change many times over the coming year, I think, or years. But this is a first start.
And to that end, I've also reached out to the project that have already received the benefit or are already part of the program, and to see what their feedback is on, like how they're using it, if they're happy with K6 Cloud anyway, but also what they remember from their sort of onboarding into this program, and what they're looking for, what their expectations were, and if they were met. So also trying to get their feedback, and maybe also extend this page with their feedback if they're open to share it, because then people coming to this page can read from their peers how they have experienced the program, and that could just be the trigger for them to be like, oh, well, maybe I should apply as well. We also added a confirmation email, because that's something that I was missing. Because of course I applied with my world domination project for this program. They haven't granted me though, which I feel a little disgruntled about. But
Isn't that the one that Victor responded to? He's like, "Is this for real?"
Definitely not for real. I just wanted to see what happens if I, click the submit button. And so we've added a confirmation email now. And that sounds really like something trivial, but I think it's really nice to for people to, hello. This needs to happen as well.
Aww. We've got bees, we've got children. It's awesome.
Of cameos here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so it sounds trivial, but I think it's really nice to have as a service to people that they, they get a confirmation email. Like, we've received your application, we're reviewing it, and while you review it, maybe look at X, Y, Z. And so that's something that we've added to this. And then also, I mean, this is a page that is there, a program that is out, but it hasn't received a lot of love or promotion. And so it really relied on people, by chance, clicking on a link in the footer on our marketing website, and then ending up here, reading this, and then applying. I think
maybe we should put it on the pricing page.
Yeah,
a link to it anyway.
I think we actually have it on the pricing page.
Oh, I totally missed that.
Oh, sorry, I forgot that screen was actually shared. So.
Yeah, but I mean, even if it's also on the pricing page, it still would, it would require people to go actually to the website and find it. And that's fine, but maybe we can also, after this round of getting feedback from people that are already in the program, to go out with this and be share it a little bit broader, and maybe ask the ones that are the maintainers that are now part of the program if they know of any projects from their peers that might benefit from K6 Cloud like they did. And so I think this could get a lot more love and attention, and I'm totally jumping on this as well, because I think it's a wonderful service.
I'm curious to get your opinions, both of you, about why we're even doing this, because I think from the traditional model, like business models, I think it might seem really weird because we're essentially giving something away for free, and we're not expecting to get anything in return, not development time or promotion or anything. We're just giving it away. Why do you two feel that something like this is necessary?
Well, I mean, definitely, I think it's part of giving back. I did expect, however, that there would be a little bit more behind this in terms of trying to get feedback from the people that are using it. And I think maybe secretly, but maybe I'm cynical. Like, I don't know. I probably am. Maintainers have a day job too. Most of them, especially probably the people that would apply for something like this, and if they get a really low barrier sort of to entry try at K6 and they like it, maybe it's something they bring to their employer as well. and it's just a thing that they have in their tool belt. Like, I understand how this works, and I've played with it for some longer time, and I've tested it on a real world project, and I want to bring it into the sorry, I want to bring it into a project that I do at my employer.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm an open source maintainer myself, and I think the amount of money I've received through GitHub sponsors over the years since introduced is less than $300. So it's definitely not paying any bills, even though the project I maintain is quite successful.
So one GitHub. Custom mechanical keyboard.
Yeah, basically. or the servers we need to test the software, basically. So that's what I'm paying with that money. But we already rely on quite a bit of open source software on K6, and we use projects to build our products as well. So it wouldn't really make sense to first use it for free and then charge them to use the service we've built using their work.
Yeah.
So I think even though there might be some truth to what Floor is saying about the cynical approach, but I also think there truly is an altruistic approach in the sense that we already get a lot of benefit from the hard work they put in, and it wouldn't be right if we didn't give back to them because of that.
It would almost be hypocritical if we didn't try to give back as well. Otherwise, we're just taking. We're not being good open source citizens on the internet.
And I'm very much hoping that maintainers also stretch the project in ways that we had not anticipated. And so that's why I'm saying about the feedback loop. Like I'd love to see more of that, because I am so curious how they stretch the project.
Naveen Kumar just shared that he so far received $14 till date from his Buy Me a Coffee button in his blog. Okay, so Naveen Kumar, I'm gonna go and buy you a coffee after this stream.
Yeah. Hey, maybe someday we can go back to actually buying people coffees in real life.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. That's so true, though. Most people who are creating content for free or creating code for free, which is a form of content, I think they do it not to make money, at least initially. Everything starts as an idea that people just want to share. And sometimes it can be difficult if you have a day job or you have other things that take up your time to pursue those really great ideas. And we're hoping that this is one step towards helping those kinds of people get their project started.
Yeah. So this one episode that we've done with Contributing Today totally talks just about funding and sponsoring, and I think it's really interesting. We can link it. And we had sort of a little gag where there was a picture of Henry from the Babel project that just had, he was just sitting behind a desk with a cardboard box, and the cardboard box said tips for Babel, and it just had this little opening and people would put like money in it, but it was and so we put this as a little gimmick on the screen while we were discussing this, because yeah, even though like it's been a long time since that cardboard box, it's still very much holds true that it feels like people are just sort of like putting in the tip in there, but it's not something that you can rely on. Yeah.
Definitely.
Hey, so I think we are almost out of time, but are there any parting words that you'd like to say to everybody? And by the way, we didn't even ask, how was your first week at K6?
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I mean, even though I've been a remote worker, right, for a lot of time already, it would still, if you started a new company, you typically, you fly out somewhere and you meet people, and of course that's not the case, and that's weird and odd, and didn't have interviews that were in person, right? Like everything through like conference calls, and that's been a new experience for sure. I am super grateful to Simme, who made me feel really welcome with the whole welcome pack with a mug, and a shirt, and a cap, and stickers. And so I felt a little bit like, oh, like special occasion. And I love. Sorry.
It is a special occasion.
Yes,
we're happy to have you.
But it's easy to forget that, right? When you don't meet each other face to face and you don't spend time traveling somewhere, or I don't know, like even stepping into the train or whatever to get to a place to meet people. And so that's been really nice. And I love your sort of tradition of these fikas, where you can, you have a virtual coffee basically with each other, and you get paired with each other as well. And so you have a chance to meet different people in the organization. And I feel like the bunny has dug a hole and is now maybe at the neighbor.
Okay.
In my absence, which is awesome. Definitely load testing the garden.
That's probably our cue.
Yeah. One last thing though. We are still hiring. So
if you want to be the next Floor and join us on office hours, click on the link below.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
It was great having you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.